Hey guys, it's Sarah, the wine-loving bookworm, back with another book and wine review for your Sunday night. I missed last week, which I'm really sorry about. We've had a lot going on. But I'm back this week with like a triple book review. Okay? Now you're excited. Not really, but okay. I will try to go fast through it because some of the books I didn't really love. So it won't be that much. But anyway, let's start with the wine tonight. I chose Menage a Trois Lavish Merlot. I do like Menage a Trois wines, but I've never tried their Lavish Merlot. So let's give it a shot. And this is my new book nook, as you can see. I don't have a lot of furniture yet, so I'm kind of just like sitting in front of the bookcases. So if you see me like reaching down and reaching around, that's what I'm doing. I don't have a table or anything yet. That'll come. Anyway, give it a shot. Ooh, that's good. Like, that is a definite, like, Merlot. If you like Merlots, you'll like this. One more time. Yeah, if you like Merlots, you'll definitely like that. That's very good. Okay, so I think 2 weeks ago I told you I would either be reading the Anne Rule book, Stranger Beside Me, or the book that's written by the two ladies that do the podcast My Favorite Murder, who are Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark. I read both, and a bonus book. But anyway, let's start with those. I'm going to start with the book Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered. This is the one by Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark. Podcast ladies, My Favorite Murder. I love My Favorite Murder. I think they talk about murders, a lot of serial killers, a lot of like crazy kind of murders, but they do it in a humorous way, which may sound weird, it may sound off-putting, but it's amazing. Maybe more for a female audience, not exactly sure, but I love it. Anyway, they wrote this book. Karen Kilgariff is a comedian, and then she writes, I think, for TV shows, from what I can glean from the podcast. And Georgia Hardstark, I think she did some stuff with like the Cooking Network and things like that. But anyway, they do this hilarious podcast and they wrote a book. And I'm like, well, I have to read the book. It wasn't great. I just think they are better improvising, like on the spot, like kind of feeding off each other. When I guess they had to like think and write stories, didn't come off so great. I mean, there were moments that I liked, but overall, I didn't like it. I mean, watch the podcast, don't read the book. So, I mean, that's kind of why I went on to read another book, because I just didn't have a lot to say about that one. Okay, so let's move on to, there may be a glare on this, total glare. Anne Rule, Stranger Beside Me. So this is Anne Rule's book on Ted Bundy. I am sort of fascinated with Ted Bundy. I'm sort of fascinated with all serial killers, but Ted Bundy in particular, because he is such... I feel like he's an enigma. You know, he is so charming, which isn't necessarily not an attribute of serial killers, but he's smart. Everyone around him was snowed. You know, he didn't have necessarily the upbringing that you see with a lot of other serial killers. So he's a fascinating guy to me. Anne Rule worked with him on like a suicide hotline. Yeah. Suicide hotline. Ted Bundy. You're calling, you get Ted Bundy. I mean, okay. But, you know, he was great at it. And he was so, like, empathetic and blah, blah, blah. You know, she says. Like, just everybody's snowed. And she knew him very well. She wasn't just, like, a coworker for a little while. They corresponded all over the years. Even when he went to jail. And even when he was going to get executed. I think she was not there, but she was in the state, like, you know, or no, she might not have been in the state. She might have been in Washington, but she was very in tune to it. And, you know, people wanted to interview her because she knew him. She wrote this book. She wrote the book before he got executed. So they have updates to the book, which it makes it a little long. It's a little bit of a long book. Fascinating, though. I know a lot about Ted Bundy. I've watched, what's the Netflix show? I can't even think about it. Something Evil and Increasingly Vile or something. I don't know. That's the movie they did with Ted Bundy, and it stars Zac Efron, which I'm not a huge fan of Zac Efron. I actually think he did play a great Ted Bundy, and I actually liked the movie a little bit better than the documentary they did called the Bundy tapes, I think, Ted Bundy tapes. just because I thought the movie kind of gave you the cliff notes of everything he did. So that's interesting. I mean, he's a very interesting character. They said they had him on like 36 murders, and when he was going to be executed, he finally started talking about him because he wanted to delay his execution. And they were like, well, we know these 36 murders. And he said, oh, well, you need to add a digit to that. Like, add a digit to that. But he wouldn't explain what he meant by that. So do you mean 136 murders? Do you mean 536 murders? Do you need 37 murders? Do you need 57? You know, it's crazy. So he is just an interesting character, you know. And she does a great job. She's a writer and a journalist, so she knows how to write. She does a great job about laying it out. So if you're at all interested in Ted Bundy, and I have read and seen and watched a lot of stuff about Ted Bundy just because I find him fascinating. So some of the stuff was duplicative in there. But if you're interested in just getting like the great like A to Z story about him, read this book. Very good. So that's my like, you know, thumbs up for today. The next book I read was my book club book, and it was called Asymmetry by Lisa Halliday. Okay, so when I went to book club last Thursday, I didn't really finish it because I was really bogged down in the end rule. So I was about halfway through. So the book's kind of separated into 3 sections, and the first 2 sections seem to have nothing to do with each other. And the first section, I was just like, this is a freaking weird book. You know, like, I just couldn't get into it. The second section, part, whatever, is better. And I started, like, picking up steam once I got through that. But I didn't finish it till after my book club. And then the third section kind of ties it together, but kind of not. You really have to pay attention. I didn't pick up anything, the connections, until I went to book club. And there was a woman there who kind of said some things, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense, you know, kind of these connections. It's more of an academic book, I would say. Like, if you want to read it and really, like, kind of dissect it, because I do think everything she does in the book is purposeful. So there's nothing she does that's kind of like a throwaway or just for background or anything. And as I was reading it with that in mind, because I didn't really think of that about that before book club, I could pick up little things. So asymmetry kind of means a balance of power, like a skewed balance of power, whether in relationships or maybe countries as you see it, and also within yourself, maybe a skewed identity issue. I don't want to give too much away. So, but you get where I'm going here. Like, this is academic. This is kind of like, I'm going to write an essay on this stuff. So this isn't like light reading. I mean, if you want to really like this book and figure it out, you've got to like really read it and like dissect it. So maybe that wasn't where I was at in my state of mind at the time, but I didn't love it. I mean, it was okay. It was okay. But I wouldn't really recommend it. People at my book club loved it. I mean, almost everyone loved it. I wouldn't say it's horrible, but I wouldn't say it's like, you know, fascinating. One thing I will say is that I didn't know. The author, when she was very young, dated Philip Roth. Who, if you don't know who Philip Roth is, he's a very famous, I'm not going to reach for it over there, but I have a couple of his books. He's a little out there to me. But anyway, when she was young, she dated him and he was old. And that kind of plays into the first story. And I guess her experience with him reverberates through the first story. I didn't know a lot about it, but one of the girls in my book club did. So she kind of said, which was, it was kind of interesting to me, especially reading some of Philip Roth's books and knowing kind of how he is. If you've read some of his, it totally makes sense now. But anyway, Asymmetry, Lisa Halliday. I pass on it. And, you know, as a review, stay sexy, don't get murdered, listen to the podcast. Skip the book. But if you want a good, really good history analysis of Ted Bundy, read Anne Rule, The Stranger Beside Me. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to take a little break, and I'm going to, like, dip down here because I don't have a table and take a sip of my wine. And move on to my book for next week. So probably a lot of you know, because everybody that subscribes to this podcast freaking knows me. I like running. I'm a big runner. I did a marathon a couple years ago. What was that? 2015, I think. Would never do that again. But I do a lot of half marathons. I do whatever. I like to run. So the next book I'm going to read is called Marathon Woman, and it's by Catherine Schweitzer. She was the first woman to run the Boston Marathon. For years and years and years, Boston Marathon was male only. And so she's the first woman. I actually think she kind of snuck in, but I'll let you know when I read this. It just caused an uproar. And then she won the New York Marathon at some point. So, very inspiring. I don't think you really have to be a runner to be inspired by books. I've been inspired by books by boxers and Navy people and all that stuff. So I don't think that is necessary. But anyway, it's called A Memoir from the Woman Who Challenged the All-Male Tradition of the Boston Marathon. I mean, girl power right now, right? Sorry, guys. But this will be good for the girls. Anyway, that's what I'm going to read next week. So tune in if you're at all interested in learning about Catherine Schweitzer. And as a recap, stay sexy, don't get murdered. Asymmetry, like kind of like less thumbs down, but kind of there. And then and roll. And then Lavish Merlot, thumbs up. Okay, guys, that's all for me tonight. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next weekend. Stay sexy.